Welcome to Week 1 in the Foundations of After-School and Summer Learning Programs. The video you watched in Week 0 represents the top tier of thought leadership about the importance of high-quality after-school and summer programming for children and youth. The vision articulated is actually the result of a significant evolution in thought about the importance of out-of-school time and the role programs can and/or should play in supporting the healthy development and academic success of school-age children. As you will discover through this lecture and the Week 1 reading, this evolution has been a response to significant changes in the social, economic, and educational needs of this country since the turn of the century. Chances are you know someone who attended an after-school or summer program, or it may have been yourself that participated. The adult labor force has seen tremendous changes over the last 75 years. Today, 60% of families include 2 working parents. 25% of children live with single mothers, and the number of mothers with school-aged children who work is near 75%. With a school day that is shorter than the workday, this presents a significant supervision gap for children. For higher-income parents living in safe neighborhoods, self-care is an option. Most often, these parents pay for children to participate in music lessons, sports teams, drama productions, tutoring, and other enrichment opportunities that promote fitness and provide quality academic support. These important experiences significantly contribute to the healthy development and academic success of these children. Until the 1990s, however, children from low-income families did not have access to these same sorts of opportunities as their higher-income peers because such programs or activities were not available, were of poor quality, required transportation, and/or cost a lot of money. Although this is still true today for millions of children, the 1990s marked a turning point in access to quality after-school care for low-income students. As you will discover in this lecture, there were several key historical, social, political, and economic factors over the last century and a half that impacted the fundamental change in purpose that these programs would serve. Click pause to reflect on the following questions. Click play to continue the lecture. The evolution of the academic after-school programs predominant today can best be understood by looking at the social, political, and economic changes taking place pre-1990 that resulted in a significant supervision gap for millions of children and led to growing concerns over how to ensure all children, especially low-income children, had access to safe and supervised environments. By the 1990s, however, the concern evolved into how this time could also be used to help close the equity gap that was growing between low-income children and their higher-income peers. Let's take a closer look at these 2 time periods. Before the turn of the century, children's unsupervised time was limited. Children kept busy working long hours in factories or on the farm, and with compulsory education laws going into effect as early as 1852 in Massachusetts, spent time going to school. By the early 1900s, about 50% of children were going to some form of school. The numbers of children attending schools significantly rose in the 1930s, with public works programs paying for the construction of new schools across America and the school day stretched from 3 hours to 6 hours. With restrictions put on child labor by 1938 that essentially required factories to only hire adults, children had significant amounts of free time. As children gained more free time, however, there were fewer adults at home to supervise them. With millions of men leaving their jobs to fight the war, millions of women entered the workforce to fill that gap. 27% of women worked in 1940, but by 1946, that had risen to 37%. This time period is when educational and professional associations first began to focus on school-aged childcare issues, and the term latchkey child was popularized as a reference to children who went home to an empty house after school and often had to wear a door key around their neck. To support family economic self-sufficiency during the war and to help fill the workforce gap, the federal government began funding childcare for all ages of children, resulting in nearly 4,000 extended day and school-age daycare programs nationally. When the war ended and the men returned to their jobs, federal justification for support also ended. Watch the following 2.5-minute video to get a historical view of the significant cultural marker for the adult labor force. By the 1960s, urban areas became more poor, saw a rise in crime, gangs, and drug use. children growing up in these neighborhoods were at greater risk of negative influences and development. Anti-poverty campaigns resulted in the first federal funding of childcare for low-income families to encourage parents to enter the workforce and/or participate in job training. Head Start was funded to promote school readiness for preschool children of low-income families. By the 1970s and 80s, women's right to work became a civil rights issue, and leaders began organizing conversations at the federal level to address family rights to childcare. Numbers of single-parent families rose, and whether or not self-care put students at risk became a national conversation. Research found it could foster independence and responsibility as well as autonomy, but it could also mean an increased risk for stress, fear, loneliness, low achievement, and exposure to drugs and alcohol. Factors influencing self-care were found to depend on individual characteristics, socioeconomic status and environment, levels of parent monitoring, peer influence, and neighborhood conditions. The numbers of children in self-care were impacted by the growth of single working mothers in the 1970s and 80s. Today, about 1 in 4 children live with an unmarried mother. What are your thoughts about self-care? Does it foster independence, responsibility, and autonomy, or an increased risk for stress, fear, loneliness, and low achievement? Click pause to take some time to reflect on these important questions. Click play when you're ready to continue with the lecture. By 1969, concerns over access to childcare led to the first White House Conference on Children and Youth. By 1970, the lack of quality in the current system was exposed through the Windows on Daycare report. In response, thousands of experts came together at the Conference on Child Care in 1970 to study quality, where they developed cookbooks of how to implement quality programs. The conference led to the development of the Comprehensive Child Development Act of 1971, which, at $2 billion, was the most comprehensive child care policy ever proposed. It gave rights to quality child care for all children, regardless of SES. However, Nixon vetoed the act in 1972, saying America should not be in the business of raising America's children, opposing what he called a communal approach to child rearing, and did not want to incentivize women to work and thus weaken the family. Click pause to take some time to review. List 3 key social, economic, and/or political factors that influence the evolving need for affordable childcare before the 1990s. Click play when you're ready to continue the lecture to find out what happened post-1990. The progressive policies of the 1990s set the stage for the paradigm shift in the importance of the role of school-age care. Structured out-of-school activities became seen as a way of offsetting the negative effects of poverty, including financial distress within the family and violence often found in poor neighborhoods. The beginning of the decade marked the first national funding of child care and school-age care subsidies for low-income and welfare families under George H.W. Bush, with the Child Care Development Block Grant of 1990. The new policy agenda was complemented by an emerging research agenda on the millions of students participating and not participating in some sort of organized after-school programming, as well as the impact this time could have on self-esteem, social skills, and academic performance. By 1995, women's rates in the workforce doubled that of 1946 to 76%. With the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, also known as Welfare Reform of 1996, subsidies became time-limited and conditional on parents working and/or participating in job training, which resulted in large numbers of single, low-income mothers entering the workforce. New research findings demonstrated that summer accounted for the loss of about 2 months of grade-level equivalency in math skills for all students, but that in reading, low-income students lost more than 2 months in reading achievement, despite the fact that their middle-class peers made slight gains. What youth did with their time after school and during summer seemed to matter more than ever. By 1997, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids emerged with a report that found when the school bell rings, millions of young people are left without responsible adult supervision or constructive activities, and prime time for juvenile crime begins. In fact, although about half of the days of the year are school days, they found 57% of violent crime committed by juveniles occurred on these days. In 1994, the federal government made its first formal recognition of the importance of before, after school, and summertime with the passage of the 21st Century Community Learning Center programs, which encouraged a partnership between schools, communities, and families in ensuring year-round, healthy development and academic success of school-age children and youth. Funding for these programs began at $40 million in 1998 and rose to almost $1 billion by 2002, and remains there today at just over $1 billion. Funding of the 21st Century Community Learning Center programs marked a significant shift in thinking about the role of after-school programs, from a place of safety and supervision to an academically focused program that could help students meet state and local standards in core academic subjects such as reading and math, and offer students a broad array of enrichment activities that could complement their regular academic programs, as well as literacy and other educational services to the families of participating children. This shift was accelerated with the 2002 No Child Left Behind Act, which reauthorized 21st century programs and transferred funding allocations to the states. It marked a significant paradigm shift in accountability for schools as well as the after-school programs to ensure the educational attainment of all children. The national response to the funding of the 21st Century Community Learning Center programs was favorable and resounding, despite initial research that nearly resulted in the program being defunded after only 2 years of operation. With public outcry about the quality of that research that had been conducted, leading researchers and advocates in the field, including UC Irvine's current Dean of the School of Education, Deborah Vandell, rallied to develop national awareness of the positive benefits of after-school and summer programs, support programs properly in developing high-quality practices, and to conduct evaluation and research that could be considered valid and reliable measures of program quality and outcomes. This movement actually inspired my own dissertation, which, in 2001, was one of the very first evaluations done on the after-school programs in California. The findings helped support continued funding decisions made by the state legislature. 21st Century Community Learning Center funding equates to about $132 million today in California. This results in about 5% of eligible children being served in grades kindergarten through 12th grade, leaving millions still unserved. Most funding in California actually comes from a voter-approved initiative. Before he became governor, voters in California helped Arnold Schwarzenegger pass Proposition 49, funding after-school programs across California. Known as the After-School Education and Safety Act, or ACES, this funding has remained at $550 million, the largest state investment nationally, resulting in 75% of all low-income schools in California served. Together, ACES and 21st Century funding are responsible for 4,400 programs serving over 430,000 K-12 students across the state. Although it is not actually a requirement, the intent of these programs is that they are offered free to all students at schools with a large majority of low-income students. Several organizations work diligently in California to provide a wealth of resources for all after-school and summer learning programs throughout the state. These organizations bring together leaders from the field to develop strategic plans around supporting programs. Most recently, these groups' efforts have resulted in the identification of quality standards and professional development tools and materials that demonstrate these standards in practice. The ACES and 21st Century Community Learning Center programs fund programs at $7.50 a day per student for 3 to 4 hours per day of programming. This equates to about $1,350 a year. Put in the context of school day budgets, which earn $49 a day per student, for 6 to 7 hours of instruction, this $7.50 is about 1/3 of what the school day would get to educate children for the same amount of time. With this allocation, programs must provide high-quality homework assistance and academic enrichment and report on outcomes annually that include academic performance and behavior. Time to review. Again, click pause to look over these questions, and click play when you're ready to finish the lecture. By taking this course, you are participating in another way California is leading the movement to help ensure high-quality after-school programs. With 1 out of 3 families with young children earning less than $25,000 a year in this country, and full-day childcare costing anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 a year, The availability of after-school programs and subsidies for low-income and working families for childcare is inadequate to ensure that children have access to high-quality childcare. By educating yourself about youth development principles and research-based practices, you become a well-informed voice for ensuring all youth have access to high-quality opportunities in the out-of-school hours. Over the next few weeks, we will be learning about some of the key practices and principles, and will practice integrating them into real-world challenges and opportunities presented in the after-school environment.